I'm joined by Penny Mordaunt now, Leader of the House of Commons and Tory MP for Portsmouth North. Thank you for joining me in the studio, Penny.
Morning.
Let's get straight down to business now. The Northern Ireland Protocol negotiations are ongoing. It strikes me that a lot of Tories, maybe yourself included, see this ongoing European Court of Justice jurisdiction as a red line. As a Brexiteer, I'm presuming you agree with them.
Well, the Prime Minister's been clear, as well as the practical issues on trade and reducing the unnecessary friction that's going on there. There are these bigger issues which are really about the integrity of the United Kingdom. They're about people being able in Northern Ireland to have a say in their future laws and regulation that they're going to have to abide by. And unless we get those things sorted, this deal will not work. So that that's the bar that people have to get over.
ECJ continued involvement in Northern Ireland, if it's about the integrity of the UK, it can't have integrity if the ECJ continues to be involved, surely.
Look, you're right. These big issues do need to be addressed, and it's not about my opinion or any member of the House of Commons. It's about the communities in Northern Ireland. The DUP have been very clear about their 7 tests, although the court isn't explicitly mentioned in those tests. It is about the integrity of the United Kingdom, and it is about their ability to have a say in their future regulation.
If the DUP aren't happy with any deal that Rishi Sunak manages to strike, there's no deal, is there?
Well, absolutely right.
So, so basically the government's in hock to the DUP?
No, it's our focus, and the Prime Minister's been very clear in these negotiations, is the people of Northern Ireland. All communities there have to have confidence in a deal, and if we can't command that confidence, then we're not going to have a deal. And clearly we've got the protocol bill, which it's not our preference, but it is there if we need it. And I think the Prime Minister would acknowledge that part of the reason we've been able to get into these negotiations, and we're actually getting some traction with the EU, is because of that command paper, is because of that bill.
But if the bill is replaced by any deal, then surely it has to be subject to a parliamentary vote. Otherwise you'll have Brexiteer backbenchers up in arms, won't you?
It very much depends on what this deal is. And I'm not in the negotiating room. I don't know the shape of it. But we'll have to wait and see where that arrives at. And it will depend on the nature of that agreement, what then has to follow. It is a negotiation between the UK government and the EU, but the people who really matter are the people in Northern Ireland.
Do you find Boris Johnson's intervention today about this useful?
It's not completely unhelpful. I think it's a
so
reminder.
You welcome it, then?
I think, you know, it's helpful to remind the EU that we have the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. It's helpful to remind them what those expectations are. But I would also just say that, look, there are encouraging signs. There is people are saying there's a lot more to do, but progress is being made, and all parties have
but some
been
might
quite
say,
positive about
well,
what's
actually,
happening.
this is all Boris Johnson and indeed Lord Frost's fault. I mean, why did they come up with this half-baked bill? It wasn't oven-ready, it was half-baked, and now it's come back to haunt you.
Look, I think as Graham Brady said, you know, this whole process has been very complicated. It's had lots of players involved. As someone that sat on the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee under Lord Frost and Michael Gove, I wish the EU had talked about the things it's now talking about earlier. We could have dealt with these things, I think, much earlier.
Lord Frost has been quite critical of you in the past. Has he made a mistake here? Is this his fault? He was meant to negotiate something better.
I think what Lord Frost says in the heat of a leadership contest is one thing. I've always got on with Lord Frost, and I think that, as I said, we should acknowledge that one of the reasons why we are able to have these negotiations and progress is being made. I wish it had been faster, but it is being made, is because of what has preceded it.
Let me just quote to you what your colleague Sir Jake Berry said about prime ministerial interventions. I think Liz Truss needs to work out what the role of an ex-prime minister is and how often she should be making these interventions. Interventions by prime ministers should be like sex in a long and happy relationship, infrequent but also always anticipated with glee.
I'm not married, Camilla. I can't comment on the metaphor there. But look, I think We all need to support the Prime Minister. I think we all know what good looks like.
But Truss
we all know
isn't
what a good
supporting
deal
him if
looks
she
like.
basically suggests that he's not as tough on China as he should be, for instance. I mean, is he weak on China, Rishi Sunak?
I think we all should be supporting the Prime Minister and the government, whether it's on these negotiations for Northern Ireland, whether it is on wider issues. We're facing huge challenges at the moment. The war in Ukraine, getting our economy back on track, those 5 priorities the Prime Minister is focused on. The country wants us to pull together and get those things done.
But can you, as a former Defence Secretary, possibly support the Prime Minister if he doesn't give this lift in defence spending to Ben Wallace?
He will do.
Will he?
We've
Well,
been
you know
clear,
he's going to commit. What's he going to commit to?
We've
then,
been
Penny?
clear in the autumn statement that defence spending needs an uplift.
OK, but
And,
10, 11 billion, which
well,
is what...
I can't comment on the figures because we have to wait to hear the budget. But I would say to people, because this is a matter I really care about,
Yes.
and I would say to people who are concerned about this, we have always funded our armed forces. We've always met our NATO commitments. Listen to what the Prime Minister said at Munich about what we need to do for Ukraine in the coming months,
spoke about
and our
doubling
contribution.
down.
It's going to be, we're going to give Ukraine more in the next few months than we did in the entire preceding 12 months.
But it sounds to me you've got an inkling that he's going to commit to the spending that the Defence Secretary is asking for, which is in excess of 10 billion.
We will have to wait and see on the figures.
But should he, Penny?
But I have been reassured by what's been said in the autumn statement, what the Prime Minister has said at Munich. Also, the fact I know that the Chancellor has previously committed, when he was running for leadership, to increase defence spending to 3% of GDP. These are people that understand this is our first duty to the nation. We've got to fund our armed forces properly. And the challenge that Ben has at the moment, it's not just Ukraine or all the operations he's got to keep going. It's also about that transition to modernise our armed forces.
Yes.
We've got to keep old kit going. We've got to, recondition and restock missiles and other pieces of equipment. But we also have to invest in those new technologies. That's what Ben Wallace needs. It's always been a priority for Conservatives, and I'm confident about what the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are going to do.
On old kit, if we can call it that, F-16s to Ukraine, do you support the idea of providing the Ukrainians with these aircraft? I know Rishi Sunak's talked about training, but I would have thought as a former Defence Secretary and a reservist with the Royal Navy, you'd actually support extending our military aid to them being given planes.
The Prime Minister's asked the Defence Secretary to look at aircraft, look at a whole raft of things. But I know the Defence Secretary is looking at 2 things in particular for Ukraine. He's looking at the immediate future and what is actually going to deliver the effect that the Ukrainians need. They need good air defence and they need particular support. So he's looking at that short to medium term. But we're also looking at what they need long term. So we're looking at training, we're looking at training pilots.
Would you like to see us supplying
things.
actual jets to the Ukrainians?
So I think we need to give Ukraine the tools to do the job.
So that includes jets?
But the effect that they need at the moment is what the immediate priority for the Defence Secretary is going to be. Air defence is part of that. We're doing a huge amount to support training pilots and so forth. But it's not just about giving someone a piece of kit, an aircraft. It's about training, and it's also about how you fight with that piece of equipment. And that is what is actually going to make the difference on the ground right now.
Moving on to other matters, obviously Nicola Sturgeon's resignation's been big news this week. Why do you think she resigned?
Well, I think time will tell. There are all sorts of reasons. I think she's made some poor judgments which haven't helped the situation. I know from my outings every Thursday morning against the SNP, there are a huge raft of questions over finances, loans, donations that have gone missing.
Right.
Their own party has been asking for police investigations into a whole raft of things. So, look, I think it's a mess. I think her going is an opportunity for all parties, but particularly the SNP, to start to get focused on the matters that matter to the people of Scotland.
Just on that trans issue that seems to have caught her and got her unstuck, there's always been a bit of prevarication about where you stand on trans, because you did say you felt a trans woman was a woman and a trans man was a man. Where are you on this issue? Do you agree with the Gender Recognition Reform Bill or not?
So the statement you've just made is about the law.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that, for example, a trans woman is like you or I, biologically a woman. The problem with the Scottish bill that was put through, I've always said you shouldn't split this matter away from healthcare. I think that's really important. But the action that Alistair Jack has taken has been about the impact of that on wider UK legislation, the Equalities Act.
Yes.
And what I think the lesson of this is you have to have regard to the social fabric of the UK, and you have to take people with you. I think that is a mistake.
But she failed to do that, clearly. I mean,
she did. And I think that may have contributed, but I think time will tell about these other issues as well, what the story is behind that.
Still more to come on that story. Penny Mordaunt, thank you very much for joining me in studio this morning.
Thank you.